My name is Rachel Rofe. I created this show because I wanted to help you see that if you have a choice, you can choose a better life. If you're listening to this podcast, you're in a pretty fortunate position. You have free will, ability to connect to the internet, and access to all kinds of new education. This podcast is meant to help you make the most of your good fortune. We talk with all kinds of people here from all walks of life because I want you to see that no matter what your situation, there's always a way to create a life that you're proud of. Hello everyone. Today we're here with Charlie Hoehn. Charlie is a crazy impressive guy. He's worked alongside people like Seth Godin, Tim Ferriss, Tucker Max, and Ramit Sethi, and he's helped launch New York Times bestseller campaigns, spoken at TEDx, was the director behind a launch that earned $2.6 million in revenue over 10 days, and has been featured all over, including places like New York Times, Huffington Post, CBS, Fast Company, Business Insider, and a ton more. So he also worked alongside Tim Ferriss during the promotion and launch of 4 Hour Body, which was #1 on the New York Times bestseller list and sold well over 1 million copies. It's also one of the top 10 most highlighted books on Amazon. His own book, Play It Away, A Workaholic's Cure for Anxiety, was called The Cure to Your Stress by Tony Robbins, and his other book, Recession Proof Graduate, has been downloaded over 150,000 times. So the dude is just awesome. Charlie has a real diverse amount of skills, so as I was preparing questions, it felt hard to just narrow down what to focus on because he has so much knowledge, but I decided to structure this interview into 2 parts. So the first will be all about how to successfully launch your book or product, and the second will be about how to deal with workaholism and the anxiety that can come with it. So, Charlie, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. That was a nice introduction. I appreciate it.
So I'd love to dive in with just talking about launching products. It's something that you're phenomenal at. You've had success with book launches, multiple books hitting the New York Times bestseller, and info products earning millions of dollars. So my first question is, when you're launching something, are there specific elements that you want to make sure are included in a launch? Like maybe you look for a specific type of a product or someone with a certain kind of audience, or maybe it's just a gut hit for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. The #1 thing I look for now, and I have to say I've been fortunate to have worked with a bunch of winners, the ones that you just listed, but I've also been a part of unsuccessful launches that have been equally illustrative in like lessons learned and figuring out why things don't work and why things do work. So one of the main things I look for now is there a strong current of demand for this product, like proven demand, or is the demand rising? So looking at existing bestsellers or precedents to whatever we're about to launch. So with the 4 Hour Body, there were a ton of books on health and losing weight, and there was proven demand for the chapters in that book, right? So if you look through that book, there's chapters like how to lose 20 pounds of fat in 30 days without exercise, or how to gain 20 pounds of muscle in just 4 hours total in the gym in a month, stuff like that. I'm not totally butchering the chapter titles, but they're along those lines. Mm-hmm. Tim was really, really smart about how he tested the demand for this book. It came about kind of organically, but mostly strategically. He wrote blog posts on those topics, and he wrote them with really compelling headlines, like that eventually became chapter titles. And he saw people's reaction, which was often very polarizing. Some people were like, oh, this is the most amazing thing. Whereas others who thought, others just assumed he lied about gaining 20 pounds of muscle, even though he had before after pictures to show it, and he laid out his exact formula for doing it. And you look at the number of comments on those posts and the number of shares, and you say, okay, maybe there's something to this. I love when authors have validated that there's demand for the topic, that they know going in that this is going to be a bestseller. One of my friends got to work with the Food Babe on her book launch, right? The Food Babe has a huge, massive audience already. And the stuff that she writes about in a way that's, I guess to put it kindly, is politically charged, often histrionic, I think, over dramatized. But she has a massive following, a huge audience of basically soldiers who are up in arms over stuff that she writes about. So chemicals in Subway's bread and chemicals in Starbucks' lattes and stuff like that. I look for, is the audience already there? Are they primed to purchase this product? How big is this audience, and have they purchased stuff similar to it in the past? So with the App Empire launch that we did, the one that you alluded to in the introduction that earned $2.5 million in 10 days, that was a 6-disc video course on how to create an online business out of apps. So how to become an appreneur. So our audience there hadn't really been a major product like that before that covered apps. But there'd been a ton of products on how to launch an online business. So it was familiar territory. There were proven winners in that category, right? There had been previous launches that had earned over $1 million in a few days or in a week or whatever. So we knew going into that there was existing demand for the topic, and the demand for the topic was on the rise. More and more people were going into the app industry. It was the fastest growing industry in the history of capitalism, actually. And people are willing to pay a premium price for that. And, you know, my buddy, Hefe Greenhart, he's this really talented videographer. He's just done amazing work. He's worked with Barack Obama. He's worked with Lady Gaga, Jim Carrey. He has a great way of putting how he decides the projects he wants to pursue, which I fully agree with. He says they have to have the 3 F's. They have to be fun, they have to be fulfilling, and they have to cover my finances. They just have to hit those 3 areas, you know. The projects the launches I've been involved with in the past that flopped, like those aren't as interesting, I guess. And I actually want to write about the failures I've had because they're just as important, more important. But I've worked on books that, you know, we launched them and nothing happened. And it fell into a number of categories. Like one, the book didn't have a strong demand. It wasn't clear what the transformation it would deliver to the reader was. Like the benefits wasn't obvious, right? There was a book that I worked on. It was supposed to be a leadership book, an inspirational book for middle schoolers, written by a guy who'd founded a massive real estate company. And I had him send me a copy because I was like, I want to read it first before we talk about whether to launch this thing. And I read it, and within the first 2 pages, I wanted to throw it out the window. I was just like, I hate this. This is not the type of book I want to be a part of. But I think I was like 22 at the time, and he offered me an amount of money that was just absurd to me at that age. So I took it, and every day just felt like such a slog. You know, it wasn't fun. I didn't believe in the message, so it wasn't fulfilling. It only covered the financial aspect. And the book was a massive flop, you know, and it was ghostwritten. So I don't think there was any incentive for him to even put out the book apart from it was an ego play, you know?
Yeah.
So I would say that's kind of a broad overview of how I think about projects now.
That's extremely helpful, and I'm glad that you went into the deads because that was actually one of my questions too, because I noticed in your book page you're saying, yeah, some of them were deads, and I think that checking out the demand is definitely really important. I have 40 books on Kindle, and most of them I've chosen were because they're already doing well on the bestseller campaign, and I just saw ways that they could be improved. So spectacular.
Yeah.
So once you choose a product, I was listening to an interview with you where you talked about how you get beta testers. So can you talk about maybe for your book, Play It Away, the process that you went through with the beta testers?
Yeah, I love it. Beta testing is one of my favorite things. It's a messy process. It just totally grounds you in reality. This is a tendency with all creatives, I think, on some level, entrepreneurs, but especially with writers. They have a tendency to lock themselves in a cave for months and months and months and months, and not literally, but to hide themselves away from their readers to create this masterpiece. And then they finally reach a point, often years later, where they're like, okay, it's ready to reveal to the world, let's ship it. And they release it, and they released it to a very tepid response or no response at all, and they can't figure out why. And it's a very heartbreaking, humbling experience because they just wasted a ton of time and effort on something that no one wants. So the beta reader process, Tim, I mentioned, he does it really well. He starts with blog posts. And that's kind of like the concept of a minimum viable product, right? Before you go off into the woods in a cabin and decide to write your 80,000 word manifesto on whatever, why don't you put up a blog post on a site where your potential readers are and see what their response is? Because if their response is nothing, then that's going to be the response to your book. If people don't jump on board and aren't excited about an essay, a small essay on the topic, you think they're going to want to read a full book on this? No, hell no. It's the idea of exposing your work to an audience early on before you get all the way through the process of writing your book. And look, I get like, you want to make something that's distinctly yours, that's great, fine. But you have to keep in mind that readers are, they're customers, and they want to feel like they're identifying with your work on a deep level. If you want to actually change someone's life with your art, then you need to make those people into a part of your art. And the way that I did this with Play It Away is, I wrote a blog post called How I Cured My Anxiety. And I actually, I didn't know what that was going to do. I just kind of put it up on my blog, and I was like, I think this will help some people that read it. And the thing took off. And it's still, in the United States at least, when you Google cure anxiety, it's still in the number 1 or number 2 spot. Totally organic, like I didn't game SEO or anything. It took off completely on its own because the content was really solid and struck an emotional chord with people, and they shared it. Based on the feedback I got literally hundreds of messages from people when it first took off. I said, there's actually more to the story. This is just one part of it. And so I thought I can expand this into a book. So I did. And I wrote about 20 to 25,000 words. And instead of, giving it to one professional editor at a publishing company, somebody who's, a pro, but they're also juggling a bunch of other books, frankly, they're way more focused on technicalities and legalities of your text than they are about the content. So for instance, their feedback will be like, the word towards, TOWARDS, is actually toward. There's no S. And so when you get that feedback, you're like, great, you just spent 3 paragraphs explaining to me something that's totally trivial that no reader cares about. So instead of going with one of them, I said to people on my blog, if you want to read an early draft of my book and give me direct feedback, sign up, tell me what your experience is in editing work and why this matters to you. Why do you care about this topic? Because I want to know that you are my reader. When this book comes out, you are going to be the one buying this, not because you want to support me, but because the topic is in dire need for you, that you want to read this book. So I filtered out people that way. And then I picked, I think, the top 30 of all the people who applied. And I think about 80 or 90 applied. And then I just gave them the PDF of the file, and I said, annotate it, leave notes throughout, and tell me if anything is confusing or if you have questions. Tell me if you get bored and start skimming. That's really important for authors, right? Because everyone's competing against Facebook, against Reddit, against Twitter, against pornography, television. Like, there are so many distractions that authors are facing that if you don't write something compelling, you lose the reader and they don't read your book and you don't make an impact when you could. It's important to get your message across. So I had them read it, and I had them tell me when stuff sucked, when stuff made them laugh, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I remember reading that you're like, tell me when you're leaning in and you're getting
Yeah.
excited. I think that's great. It's really good feedback to just get the emotional. I mean, because really that's how people remember books anyway, how they kind of how they were with it
Yeah,
emotionally.
exactly. It's how we remember everything. Everything is how did it make you feel? For the vast majority of people, that's how you make an impact on somebody. They remember how you made them feel. I really wanted to nail that. I got some really brutal feedback from people. My beta readers, that's 30 editors, right? Even if they're not quote unquote professionals, all these people were smart. And one of them caught something that I don't think a professional editor would have caught. Frankly, I've worked with professional editors. They wouldn't have caught this. He noticed that the second chapter and the first chapter needed to be flipped. And as soon as he said that, I was like, oh my God, he's so right. It totally changes the tone. Yeah, they saved my book. They made it so much better. I think every author should do that. I think every entrepreneur should do that. They should release the ugly, imperfect versions and iterate based on the feedback that they get from their prospective customers. And to be honest, like, those people not only bought the book when it came out, even though I gave them free copies, they also were ready to review it and to give it a 5-star. I didn't even have to tell them to do it because they'd already read the book and seen how far it came, and they considered the product theirs. They're not going to give me a 1-star. They helped make this book. And so they liked it, and they're going to tell people about it.
Absolutely. That's such a great idea. And for the people who are listening who might not have an established blog or something, I know that you posted this on Reddit too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's forums and stuff on Reddit, all around the internet, but Reddit's obviously a big one and very active, and those people are brutal. They're very much nerdy guys who would never say these confrontational things to you to the face, but in there, if you're not like spot on, the nicest human being or whatever, they'll jump on you. So I kind of wanted to get them on my project because I want those kinds of people who are just like, your work is bullshit. I want to hear that because I want to be able to know what's triggering that. If they have a point or if it's just because they don't like me, whatever. I need that feedback. I can't have sycophants surrounding me just telling me how great my work is. And it's the same with every author. Every creative is going to be asking their friends and family for feedback. But guess what? Those people, they're going to stroke your ego every time. You need people who aren't emotionally invested in you telling you whether your work sucks or not, because that's real feedback. And that's what will allow you to hit a bigger audience successfully.
Absolutely. So yeah, so for those of you listening, there's Reddit, you can go on forums. And I'm curious for you, when you were getting all this feedback, did you do something with your mindset or like have some kind of perspective? Because I'm sure you worked really hard on the book at your art. So to go and be open to, you said some people were brutal. Did you do anything before?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So apart from crying myself to sleep, no, yeah, you need some emotional fortitude to take that kind of feedback, right? Those who haven't read Play It Away, the first part is a personal memoir. It's my story. So to have somebody say, if you lead with this chapter, you sound like a spoiled brat. You need to flip the chapter. I was like, man, it does make me sound that way if I don't flip these. I forget what some of the other feedback was. This one guy, I think I wrote about it. This one guy just straight up didn't like the book, and he was like, there's nothing groundbreaking in here. There's nothing new. I think this was an additional ego stroke. There was another guy who reached out to me when I was launching the book, and he was like, this is just further workaholism. I get on the phone with those people. I try to, and I try and have a real connection with them because oftentimes they write something out of some frustration of their own. You have to understand that, like, when somebody attacks you, it's very infrequently about you. They're not doing it dispassionately. There's something that you've done or said that's sparked a personal problem of their own. You're reflecting a mirror image back at them. where they're uncomfortable with the reality you've proposed or the ideas you've proposed for some reason. And so, like, I look at it as, okay, I'm not trying to get this person to like me, but I do want to hear them out, and I want to have a real conversation with them, because it's easy to be rude, it's easy to be blunt, and it's easy to be misunderstood if everything's through email and written. I think all creatives are sensitive people, and so it's hard not to take stuff personally. And I know bloggers who've broken down into, I've seen them break down in tears because they're so afraid of nasty comments. I don't know. It's like, I've experienced my share of those over the years, and I've been writing online since 2008. So coming up on 7 years here, I've received my share of kind of nasty comments, and they used to shake me up a little, but it's just part of the game. You got to recognize that, like, it's rarely about you. It's mostly about them. Take it in stride, try to connect with them. And I learned this from Tim, actually. He kind of conditioned me to do it. He's like, always thank them first. Say thank you for your feedback, and then say whatever you got to say, but do it in a way that's really kind, because you can flip a hater into a fan just by being kind. They're waiting. A lot of them, especially on Reddit, they want you to freak out. They want you to be a jerk, because then they can escalate. Then they can drive that knife into your back even further, or twist it. They want a reaction. So don't give it to them. You just be nice.
That's great pointers. Thank you.
Sure.
So I was also curious, as far as actually book marketing, in some of your other interviews, I thought you gave some great pointers. As far as one thing you mentioned was naming chapters that would be blog posts that a lot of people would click over to and whet their appetite. And you also mentioned making the titles of books something that would be easy to remember and fun and not embarrassing for somebody to actually say out loud. Is there anything else that you would either want to say about that, or any other tips as far as just like once people are actually on your Amazon page, getting them to purchase the book?
Titles. I think title is so important, and I actually like Play It Away. Perfect title, terrible for marketing. It's a perfect title because it encapsulates the main idea in the book, which is important. It's bad for marketing it, because if I told you to read a book called Play It Away, you would have no idea what the hell it's about, and it's not a compelling title that makes you want to open the book, right? I have to explain that this is a book about adding play to your life and getting, combating anxiety naturally and free, and finding a balance in your life. And there's all these benefits to the book, which you can read about, but it's not obvious in the title. Great titles are like, ooh, you just know them. And it's hard to nail it. Like, a great title is Think Like a Man, Talk Like a Woman, or Walk Like... I forget what it is.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
But I think like a man, act like a lady? Is that what it is?
It's something like that. I mean, it's not a testament to memorability. But Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus is a similar title. It's great because it's polarizing. Excellent, right? Both men and women are intrigued by that, and they find it kind of offensive in some way, in a way that they can't even understand. It's like they're already defensive by the title. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, right? But it's also complimentary at the same time. They want to figure out why that's a good thing and what the differences are. Think Like a Man complements the man's natural ability to be a thinker, I guess. I don't know. Women can think too. But it complements what men value, which is thinking, act like a lady, talk like, I forget what it is, but that's complementary to women too. The 4-Hour Workweek, obviously brilliant title, very compelling, very polarizing, because the 4-Hour Workweek appeals to our desire to escape the rat race and to, not to be lazy, but that's why it's polarizing, right? You don't know if it's be a lazy person. It's not about that. And it's a book that people, most importantly, it's not just the title that carries the book, right? Because if the 4-Hour Workweek sucked as a book, it would have never taken off. It's a great title, but it's also a fantastic book that people hand to their friends and they say, you got to read this, or they carry it around as their Bible. And what's hilarious in the book is like Tim actually instructs the reader to do that. So like these people who are traveling around and going from hostel to hostel are carrying around just the 4-hour work week and reading it. And so they're like advertising it as like, this is my lifestyle. This is a new thing. I'm thinking in terms of the authors I've worked with. I hope they serve beer in hell. Another divisive title, kind of polarizing. It's obvious what the book is about. It's obvious the transformation or the benefit that you're going to get from it, right? The benefit is it's going to be offensive and probably entertaining. It's got to be clear what kind of benefit you're delivering or what transformation, what can they expect from this in the title. I think that's really important. Obviously, to have 5-star reviews and stuff is important. Past a certain number of reviews, like 50 is important. I think it's important for all authors to like facilitate that process. If you don't have an active role in getting reviews, you're leaving it in the hands of crazy people who leave reviews just spontaneously for everything they consume. But most importantly, you got to write a great book. And I think the beta reader process is very important. The testing of chapters is important, like giving people samples of your work, even when it's imperfect. Otherwise, you have no idea if people want more or whatever. Like the person who wrote 50 Shades of Grey, the best-selling book of the last several years before Harry Potter and Twilight and stuff, that person, they did something really smart. They were writing fan fiction in the Twilight forums. They were just taking the Twilight characters and making them have sex in their stories, right? So they channeled existing demand for this topic. Twilight was huge, and so this person just went in. And then once they validated that those stories were popular, they took them, put them on their own site, changed the characters so they were unique and, like, I guess proprietary would be the word to describe it. Like now copyrightable material that was uniquely their own. They had validated that there was demand, and so they made 50 Shades of Grey. And 50 Shades of Grey, it's a good title. It's not amazing. You have no idea what it's about going into it, but it's a great book for the people who read that kind of stuff. It's not a great book for us, maybe. We don't care about that. But for the people who want that kind of material in a safe way, right? That's not an embarrassing book to give or recommend. It's not. Like, that's the brilliance of that book, is it's safe to read in public. The cover makes it safe.
Absolutely. So 2 more questions about books, because I know there's so much to ask around.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt, Rachel. I just wanted to add one more thing. Cover is like hugely important. You have to get a good designer for your cover that makes the book super beautiful and you want to click it and read it. It has to be good as a thumbnail. It has to be good in real life. Cover design, so important. Can't overemphasize that enough. Hire a pro. Don't do it yourself.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I actually just had one of my books that wasn't doing well at all, and all I did was change the cover, and the sales rank just completely was supercharged because of that cover. So that's a great point. 2 other book questions. The first thing is, you know, you've worked with so many New York Times bestselling authors, and I know that obviously having demand for books is really important. And then when you're actually going and you've got the demands and you've written the book and you want to market the book, what would you say are like some of the maybe top 3 things that people can do to successfully market their book? And specifically, I mean things like maybe offering like bulk packages of the book or things that, you know, really have a big impact.
Yeah, this is great. So the first thing authors have to understand, or aspiring authors have to understand, is that you're not going to get rich off of one book unless you sell thousands and thousands of copies, right? And it's a perennial bestseller, or a topic that's going to be in demand 10 years from now as strongly as it is now. You can do the book route a few different ways. I'll talk about them now. So you can do the route that Tim took with the 4-hour work week. A lot of people try to emulate what he did. It's really hard to hit all the things that he hit in that, which was there are a bunch of press hooks in that book. So at the time that it came out, virtual assistance and delegation, that was kind of a new thing, or outsourcing, right? That was a new thing, and it's a controversial topic. So the news can cover that easily. That's a story. It was also laid out, and again, there's multiple reasons this great book, but what he did was he personally met influencers and like partied with them. He drank with them and became friends with them. You know, it's something most people don't do in the tech community. They spend their days behind a computer, and they think that emailing, and a lot of authors do this, they think that emailing an author and saying, hey, can I send you a free copy of my book? I think you'll love it. Having never met that person, thinking that that author's actually going to care. They're not going to care. We get so many free books, it's ridiculous. Rachel, I'm sure you get tons of free books, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, how many of those are you actually going to read unless you've met and actually really like the person that wrote it? It's pretty low, right? You have tons of other stuff that you can do with your time.
Exactly. I mean, you're asking somebody to give you 2 to 3 hours of their valuable time or more when you don't have an established relationship. It's pretty, like, rude, actually.
Yeah, it is in a lot of ways. Like, it's the same when they send you an email and it's like 10 paragraphs and they're like, here's my life story, and they don't include a question, and it's like, what kind of crazy person are you thinking that just because you wrote me that you deserve my time and attention? Like, I'll read your email, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to respond. And the same thing with your book. Just because you wrote a book doesn't mean you deserve my time just because you gave me something that cost $3 to print. So it's like, you can't be that selfish. So you can take the route that Tim did. I'm an author too. Like, I sympathize, and I've done these things that I'm chastising right now. And I've recognized now, as a busier person than I once was when I was like 22, that, oh, okay, like, you really have to be courteous to people's time and understand how people work. Everything is relationship based. If you actually want somebody to plug your work who has an audience of thousands or millions, then you need to know them. You need to befriend them. And how you do that can be strategic or organic. It doesn't really matter. It's just, that's a fact. You need to befriend them somehow. The other ways that you can successfully make it as an author, one is through volume. For fiction writers, you can just keep cranking out work. Just keep writing work, writing books, and self-publishing them in genres that have high demand. So I have a friend who does this. He speaks into his phone and he tells stories. And he doesn't stop to edit himself. He just keeps talking and talking, and then he has somebody transcribe it. He has an editor clean it up. Then he reviews it, then he publishes it. He puts a good cover on it, and he goes. He's in his 30s. He's written over 30 books. He makes between $10,000 and $30,000 a month because he's written for genres that are in demand. He keeps going, and he keeps getting better each time. And this is critical to artists. It's like, keep shipping. Stop focusing on making your masterpiece. Get it to where it's good enough that you're not embarrassed by it anymore and you know that people like it, and then release it and do something else.
Yeah, just to add to your point really quickly, I have a friend, Melanie, she and her sister, Shawn Thomas, they actually work together and they keep creating Kindle books every like 4 to 6 weeks. And they've been doing this for just under a year with just their Kindle books. They became New York Times best-selling authors, and they're making like $80,000 a month with their romance series. Just crazy. Yeah, amazing.
See, I love hearing stories like that, right? Because people don't even know still that this is a reality. The people who are listening to this who think like, oh my God, you know, I could never do that. I could never be like Tim Ferriss and hit the New York Times bestseller. You just heard what Rachel said. Those people have been doing it for less than a year. They are just like you, and they start in the exact same way that you do. They had the same fears, same insecurities, but they did it. And that's the only difference between you and them. is they actually went out and did it. They figured it out, and you can figure it out too. If you know how to use a computer, you know how to use Facebook, you can use that time to create for others. You can stop consuming everything that everyone else is creating and start creating on your own, and become somebody who starts to make money through the things that they gift to other people. I want to cover one final way that authors often don't consider, but is an equally legitimate way to write books, sell thousands and thousands and thousands of copies, and actually have it be easier for you. I've done campaigns in the past where, you buy 10,000 copies of the book, or 1,000 copies of the book, and you get a trip to Africa with the author, and, go on a safari and stuff, so you do bonus stuff. Another way of selling thousands of copies is to say, all right, which companies or organizations are aligned with my message? For instance, I have a message about helping people with mental health. And anxiety, right? What I could have done, which actually probably would have been smarter in some ways, is approached a bunch of mental health organizations and said, I look up their annual report in advance so I can find what their strategic and marketing initiatives are. So I have an idea of, okay, these are the goals they're trying to hit. These are the messages they're trying to get out right now. And I just approach them and I say, hey, I noticed that you guys are trying to do this. You're trying to change the nation's conversation about mental health. It's really interesting because I actually have a project or a book that I'm working on right now. It's really well aligned with that, and I can help you achieve your goal of reaching more Americans. Would a conversation about this be of interest? And just proposing that to them, you get on the phone with them, you hear them out, you hear what their goals are, and then you propose a partnership where they distribute your book to their list. They have some say in something in the book. Like, what if I'd gotten a big mental health organization to sponsor Play It Away, and in exchange, all they wanted was a plug? My friend Lewis Howes, he wrote a book on how to do webinars successfully, and he reached out to the webinar company that he always uses to run his webinars, and he said, why don't you be a partner? You can be an advertiser in this book. And so he got them on board to effectively write in advance for him, instead of going through the publishers, the traditional publishers who, frankly, you don't need. They're very antiquated. They're not that great at a bunch of their roles. They're really good at distribution in physical bookstores, but everything else basically can be replaced by just as effective freelancers or partners. Instead of asking them for an advance, which they're probably going to give you a paltry advance in your first book, if you can create something that's aligned with a company or an organization that has a budget, and a lot of these companies and organizations have a huge marketing budget, your book is a marketing expense to them. And if you can align with them, if you can pull the blinders off of your own vision and actually work as a team with somebody else and help them achieve their vision too, you can sell more books than you thought were possible. There are authors you've never heard of that sell books by the truckload, like at the snap of their fingers, because they're good at this. And so that's always a possibility.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal point. You make me think of Jason Surfer App, who actually also had a podcast on Lewis Howes, and how he took every page on his book basically had a different sponsor. He just got a huge advance by himself getting all these sponsorships, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for bringing that up. And unfortunately, I see we're at time. I want to make sure you have some time before your next call. But thank you so much. This has been awesome. I know we didn't have time to go over more about the anxiety and workaholism, but I will have a link to your book in the show notes because it's a great book. Yeah, just thank you so much. I know people are going to really benefit from this, and I so appreciate you taking some time to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Rachel. And yeah, let me know if there's anything else I can do. Let me know when the episode's up. Looking forward to sharing it with everybody.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to A Better Life. You can find all show notes for this episode at rachelrofe.com. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe so you can automatically get access to all new shows. Let's also connect. Just go onto Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram /Rachel Rofe, and we can talk there. The opinions of all guests here are their own, and I'm not necessarily endorsing any of them. I do want to give you